JavaScript developers writing hybrid applications. So that's who we are, and I'm just going to close this now. And the entire workshop actually is available on the GitHub. So if you don't follow anything, or if some of these steps are wrong, we'll go ahead and edit them and use this as our script to run through some of the things that we are going to do today. Though the title of the track or this session says Visual Studio, as you can see, I'm on the Mac, and there's no Visual Studio for Mac yet. But what we have got is VS Code for Mac, and you should definitely download the Visual Studio code. And we are actually have released an extension for Cordova applications just yesterday. And Ryan is going to make that big announcement tomorrow for everybody else who is not a part of this particular presentation today. So that would allow you to actually debug, have IntelliSense for Cordova plugins, and some kind of integration from in editor to run Cordova commands like build and run from within Visual Studio Code. And Ryan will demo most of it tomorrow. So with that, the goal of this particular workshop is, what I'm trying to do here is explain how typically these hybrid apps are built, go through some of the testing mechanisms, and more so, actually spend a lot of time and activity on the Visual Studio Team services, the cloud offering that we have that will enable you to write a continuous integration build system, which is kind of connected to your GitHub repo. So as soon as you make a commit, the continuous integration kicks off. It will help you build your application and possibly actually run tests. If you have time, I'll show you that from the cloud. And eventually, it will actually use deployment to Hockey App. How many of you have heard about Hockey App here? Okay, 50. But Hockey App, Microsoft actually acquired Hockey App, and it allows you to deploy your hybrid applications especially for beta testers. So you can deploy your application to Hockey App. I'm going to wear my tester's hat, and I'm going to have a persona of a tester, and a tester can get that particular app, install it, test it around, send feedback. Hockey App also allows you to have some kind of crash reporting mechanism. So if there's a crash, it will be kind of logged onto the Hockey App instance, and that way you can actually test your application, the running application on your device, before even sending it out to your consumers. So that's the whole approach here. So basically, get your app locally, run some tests, run it, deploy it locally, see how it works, and then commit a change to trigger a continuous integration system that will build and deploy to Hockey App. That's the goal. And that's the session, right? The audience here is, how many of you are real Cordova developers or build hybrid applications here? Yes, so good. We have the right set of people here. And how many of you have actually had interest or have tried continuous integration systems, or anything else? Like how many of you have really got into that problem? Good. So we can talk and discuss about how you can use these systems to actually deploy. So should I stay? If the answer to both these questions were hand raised, you should stay. Even if the answer to that one of them was no, I think you should stay because you'll learn something more and learn something new. And we'll do the activity so you will see the pain points that can be solved by our VSTS cloud build support. So prerequisites, as I said, we are going to do this as a workshop. So hopefully all of you have a GitHub account. And what I'm going to do is we are going to play with the code here. So if you can actually fork that particular app, this is the app that I'm going to run on my device. So if you can fork it and clone it down, that would be great so that you can see what I'm doing with that.
So can you zoom in on the thing there so it's a little more visible to folks? Command plus. There you go. There you go.
So if you can fork this particular instance of the repo and clone it, we can get started. I've already done it here. full stop down. This is an Ionic app built with some test framework installed, and I'm going to talk about this testing methodology. Right? So first thing, I'm just going to run the app. So Cordova, run Android. So once you have forked the repo and cloned it, you can just run this. Right now, you can just see the app here. I will demo this app and we'll run this instance in VSTS. Okay. So
we need to add Android.
So this is again a templated Cordova app, and it's actually launching the app on my device, and there it is. That it's a feedback app that we have actually posted to Android and other iOS store. It allows you to give feedback on this particular PhoneGap Day conference that we are running, and it actually allows you to kind of log in with your Facebook stuff. So it uses the Facebook on. So I'm going to actually log in. So sure. This is just the app right, running on my device. That was the demo of the app. Now let's kind of run through the actual test, and for that I'm going to demo you some stuff. So here see the demo app. That was just chapter 1. What is the app looking like? Right? We saw the app, and the next thing that I want to show you are the actual tests that we have running for this particular app.
So if you're going to zoom in there again.
Are you just using the web SDK for Facebook?
Yeah. So the next thing that I wanted to show you around is how many of you have difficulties in running the test, right? Like actually configuring your test and running the unit test and running the UI test. It's when we started writing this particular app, it took us about 3.5 days just to see what kind of options are available and then use the right set of options, right? There's Karma, there's Jasmine, there's JUnit, there's Hotspot. So basically what we decided was we came up with this Karma config, and you can see that it's right here, which is a test runner that allows you to run Jasmine test for your Angular based Ionic app, right? What it does is it is currently running all your tests in a windowless browser, which is a Phantom.js browser, and it's actually loading all the unit tests from your unit test folder. And after it's done, it will actually present the data to you. So let's try running that particular test. So I'm going to run gulp test, and all the tests, the runner is actually defined in the gulp file. So if you go to the gulp file of the project, and it can be this project you can use as a starter template. Go ahead.
Why would I use Karma instead of Jasmine CLI?
So Karma actually allows you to run these tests multi-browser. Jasmine CLI is actually tied to the Node.js browser only. So since you are building this particular hybrid app that targets multiple web views and multiple platforms, that's why you might want to use Karma, which actually targets multiple browsers. That's a good question, actually. So that's how we run the Karma test. So basically I have a gulp task that runs the Karma test, and I'm going to run the gulp task. As you can see, it's launching the Karma web browser, and it has gone through my unit test and ran all those unit tests, giving me those particular options. So that's how you can actually run your unit test locally. The next question is, okay, I run my unit test, it launches in a browser context. how do I actually get UI test working from this particular point onwards, right? And again, there are multiple possibilities. You can use Protractor, because Protractor is a test framework that allows you to actually run your UI test for Angular platform. So if you're using Angular, you use Protractor, that again targets Selenium server on the server side, and the client as a protractor that talks to this server side, and you can run your UI test. But what if you want to run your UI test on a device? Selenium and protractor still allows you to run them on a browser, but not on the device. And there's a product called APM. How many of you have heard about APM? Yeah. So APM actually allows you to run these tests on a device or emulator. Trying to shake it, nothing will happen because we have not yet written the code for that, which is great.
Well, I guess I should respond until I finish the workshop.
But that's fine. So here's the protractor config that I would want to you guys to take a look at. So here's the protractor local config, and what I've done is I've set the Selenium address to the protractor, to the APM address, the 4723. It's a standard APM server that it's running on, and the capability I'm running it on an Android device or an Android emulator. So if there's an Android device connected, it would directly run that particular test on my Android device. And it's again using Jasmine kind of testing. So if I go to the actual test, you'll see that what it does is it asks the browser to sleep for some time because there's a kind of a splash screen right there, and then it's doing some pieces of like getting the element which I want to click. Here there's a login button, and the syntax that you see, the by ID, is all driven by the WebDriver actually. So Selenium and WebDriver allow you to actually go and check the IDs and get those elements. And browser.driver is the call that Protractor uses to connect to your browser instance, the WebKit, the web view inside your application. And then it's a Jasmine, so you're expecting that you have a viewport and it's a Facebook viewport, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this from the Protractor command. So I go to node modules and and then I'm actually going to run this config. And you can see that there is this APM server that is running, and it's actually installing the app onto my device here, and it will show up. There you go. So it's actually running the app on my device, and it will actually simulate the login click, and it will run the app. So it's running the app. I wish I could have the reflector working here so that you could see it on the screen here. But this app is actually launched from my protractor, and it's running it on the device, and it's clicking the login button, and there you go. And it's actually showing you the Facebook login screen. So that's the first UI piece that you would want to test, that is my login button actually calling the Facebook auth and giving me that particular screen. And it actually shut down the application because it's run the test. And if you come back, you'll see that it actually ran the test and there were no failures on it. And this is all local testing. But with Sauce Labs, and I'll show you again, we have that in the VSTS kind of setup. But you can have a Sauce Lab account, and Sauce Lab actually uses APM to test applications on the web. It's a cloud-based testing, and they have emulators and devices. So you can actually connect to a Sauce Lab account from VSTS, from our cloud build, and run your test on Sauce Lab. So that's what we'll do. So this was all local, and now we'll get into actually building the CI system. So let's actually go this. We got through the demo. We ran through some of the UI test and the unit test. That completes the step 1. Step 2. Okay. Before we kind of do the VSTS, I would want you to kind of register to this hockey app, because what the VSTS instance is going to do is going to publish your app that we are going to edit and make a change or the shape to do something, right? So for that, and we are going to release this application for testers to actually test our application. So go to the link and sign up for the hockey app so that we can get started on the VSTS. So Basically, I'm going to do it with you. So I'm going to click this link, hockeyapp.net, user sign in. And you can use your existing account, like the Gmail account or an Outlook account or any account that you would want to use, associate with this Hockey App instance.
Where are the steps again? Sorry, go behind.
Oh, sorry. So if you go to my GitHub,
They're not in the README.
yeah, so if you go to github.com, Subhag PO,
Yeah.
PhoneGap Day workshop, one word.
Oh, okay, it's different than the app. Sorry.
And we are at the step 2. Keep this around actually. I think I've saved a password on this one. So as soon as you log in, you see something like this. And I'm going to demo this workshop for Android APK, but this should also work for iOS if you're building for iOS. So if you have signed up and completed the registration, instead of building the app, because everybody might not have Android platform, I've also given a link to the actual app, the actual APK that you can actually add to your Hockey App instance. So if you can build the application, great, go ahead and add the platform and build it. Otherwise, there's a link that you can use to download the application and basically add it to your Hockey App instance. So that's what I'm going to do. Actually, yeah, here, this is the app. I'm just going to download it. So I've copied this, and what I'm going to do is, once you have the Hockey App dashboard, I'm going to add this version of the app. This is my first version of the app, and I want to send it across to the testers to test it. Okay. So we've got built it, but because you might not have the platform added, you just add this particular app, right? And the next build that we are going to do is actually going to build through our cloud services. That's why you might not need the platform to be added locally. So I'm going to add this app, and click this here and go back to my app that I just downloaded in my apps directory, like that, and then say open, and it's actually uploading the first version of the app to Hockey App instance, right? There it is. I'm going to actually release this app so that my tester can test it. And yeah, some comments, first version. That's fine. I don't want to restrict any downloads for now. And send me notifications when people do it, right? So done. Thank you. And as you can see here, it's actually the first version of the app, the 0.0 version of the app. I go back to my app, and there's some app ID. Remember that we will be using this app ID for deployment through VSTS. But if you can see, like I'm now wearing my tester's hat, and once I uploaded my app on my tester's device, he can look and see that particular app shown up as available for install. So right there. So he can see this particular app and he can say that, oh, there was a version uploaded by the developer. Let me go ahead and download it and test it. Okay? So that's a local workflow that where you actually upload this particular app, give it to your tester downloads it, tests it, and gives you a feedback, right? How do we want to automate it? And we want to automate it using the VSTS team services. So now with all of that setup done, what we need to do is we need to actually create a VSTS instance. How many of you have Outlook account? Everybody? Good. Because VSTS needs a Microsoft account. It does not work with your Gmail or Facebook account as well. So let's go ahead and use your Outlook account, Microsoft account, to actually create an instance of Visual Studio Team Services. So let's do that. Okay? So let's get started for free, and I'm actually going to create this. Log in with your existing account.
So where are we supposed to go to do this?
So go back to visualstudio.com. That was the page. Right here. So go to visualstudio.com, and there should be, if you want to do team collaboration, so click on Get Started for free.
Gotcha.
So we are going to create the free instance of the VSTS. This particular instance of VSTS allows 5 developers to collaborate together, and it's free. So you can test it out and then get a paid service if you want. So this instance allows you to have a collaboration between 5 people. So I am going to actually start for free. So should you. And now you can start actually using your Outlook account. So if you don't have one, you can sign up here.
So this is step 3, right?
Yeah. We are at the step 3. We are creating a new VSTS account here. So instead of creating a new Microsoft account, if you already have one, which I do, you can use that particular account. And I'm going to use it. Okay, so I have signed it into an account, and now what I'm going to do, you should see this particular screen once you sign it with an existing account.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we are going to actually create. We are going to go into this particular account. There's a link on the right hand side that to go to your VSTS instance, and you should have a project created for you.
Yeah.
And in this particular project, we are now going to link this particular project to the fork that we created or the GitHub repo that we created, right? So here, and I'm going to create a build definition so that anytime kind of make a change in this particular repo, it will trigger off my continuous integration. So for that, go to build, and create a new build definition. So add this new definition. I click the plus button on the left hand side to create a new build definition. Once you create this build definition, we are going to start with an empty build definition. So here, create an empty build definition and click the next button. It will ask you what kind of a project you would want to attach to this particular build definition, right? And you say that it's a GitHub project because that's what we are using. Now you can use Git or a VSTS instance, a VSTS code instance itself, but for the purpose of this particular demonstration, we are going to actually connect it to your GitHub repo. So you connect it to your GitHub repo, select GitHub, say that you want continuous integration, and say create. This will add the new build definition, and it will ask you what kind of repository you would want to connect it to, right? So go to the repository tab, and that's where we say that it's the GitHub connection, right?
That's where we got to add our GitHub connection.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So here, if you go, like if you won't have a GitHub connection, so go to manage. And in the new service endpoint, you will actually create a GitHub connection. So if you see on the left hand side, it says new service endpoint. Actually click the GitHub thing there. And now we are asking the VSTS instance of yours to connect to the GitHub repo. Okay. So go back to your GitHub repo, at the actual repo that you own. And what we'll have to do is, in your settings file, you'll have to create a personal access token so that the VSTS instance can talk to that particular GitHub repo. So in your settings, you will go to your settings and go to personal access token. Okay? And this is where you would add a personal access token just for VSTS to connect. So I'm going to say generate new token. It will ask for confirmation of password. And if you go back to your VSTS instance, it will tell you what kind of user recommended scopes are required. So if it says that recommended scopes are repo, user, and admin repo. So basically add your access token for those three requirements. So I go to repo, I click repo, I go to admin repo hook, and finally I click user. And I generate the token. And give this VSTS. So it generated this particular token, a big string for me. I copy that string, go back to my VSTS instance, and put that into the token field, and say my connection is GitHub connection. This is just the connection name.
That's what I got now. I got a different error.
Is the VSTS stuff down? Let's try it again. Demo guards. Demigods. Second time it worked. It did. So copy your token and give it a name. Yep.
I was good this one the first time.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, it's just VSTS being slow.
Did it work the second time?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it did work the second
Second
time.
time.
I just closed and read it.
Alright.
Yeah.
Anyone else following along? Did anyone else stop and a problem? No?
Did you get the connection working? Good. Okay. So if it doesn't work, it's a problem with VSTS being slow, but it should work. It should help you connect to the VSTS instance, right? So with that service point connected, go back to your build, which should be on the first tab, and now choose the repository, right? So have the GitHub connection and refresh this, and if you see, it will actually now pre-fill with all the repos that you have under that particular connection. So for me, I'm going to go back and say that the one that I want is my fork repo, which is Subhag PO app. If you fork the repo app and cloned it, you should be able to see your fork here. I want to run this as and when the changes are committed to my master branch and clean the changes on the VSTS instance as you are building it. I don't have any submodules, so I'm not going to check that field. So that's my Cordova CI. I'm going to name it as Cordova CI. And I'm going to say OK. You will see that the new build definition is actually created. So this is creating a build definition that will actually trigger. We have not added any tasks as yet. We have just connected to our repo so that anytime I make a change to my repo, it will actually trigger the continuous integration build. Next thing that I want to do is actually build a package, right? So I go to my build definition, which is the first tab, build. Those who are following with me can just click on that critical tab, and you can see they have not added any build definition because there aren't any. What I want to do here is I want to actually run a Cordova build on the VSTS instance. For that, we have actually shared Cordova extension for VSTS on the marketplace for Visual Studio Team Server. So if you go to marketplace, which is again in the right hand corner there, and go to browse marketplace, it will take you to the VSTS marketplace, and you can see that in build and release you have a Cordova build extension. So I can click that and say install. It will ask whether it wants you to install it for this particular account. You just say confirm. It's already installed, and
Proceed.
then proceed. Yeah. So once you do that, what will happen is, if you say add a build step, you'll actually see in the build, you'll see Cordova build being added as an extension or an availability to that particular VSTS instance. So now you can actually use this Cordova build to build your hybrid application, and it will be on that particular instance of VSTS. In addition to Cordova build, you can also do a Taco build or an Ionic build, and we also allow you to build PhoneGap. So we can run PhoneGap command. In fact, I have a build step which I can demo. I don't know whether we have the time to actually go through the activity as such, but I can, if I have a PhoneGap remote account, I can use my VSTS instance to actually log into my PhoneGap remote and actually execute a remote build and curl down the output of a remote build onto my VSTS server. So even that is possible using the PhoneGap build.
Is that done through a separate extension?
No, it's available as a part of the Cordova build extension.
Or as part of Cordova build?
Yeah, we support Cordova. When you download the Cordova build extension, you get the PhoneGap as well.
So we add this extension to our definition.
Yeah, now we add this task to our definition. So I'm going to actually add it. Close this, and you can see that it added a bunch of stuff, right? Like it added the build step. It allows you to configure the build step. And for this particular case, I'm building it for Android and debug, but you can actually have different flavors of it. And for different flavors, you can actually provide different parameters, like whether it's an AND build versus Gradle, whether you have a release build, so you need a key store file for a release build. Whether if it's an iOS, do you have the certificates and the P12 content, PF12 content? What about the export developer part? because this instance is running Windows. You will need a remote Mac agent to connect to build iOS, or you use PhoneGap remote build to build iOS, or backend cloud service to build iOS. So that's how you can actually build iOS. I'm going to build Android, and that's the only thing that I need. Now once a change is committed to my repo, it will go and do a Cordova build which will build Android. But what I also want is, once the build is completed, I want it to deploy to Hockey app so that my tester now actually gets the new version, right? For that, let's go back to the marketplace and add the Hockey app extension, which I've already added, but I'll show you here. So browse to marketplace, and it should be here in the featured section. So this will actually allow me to actually deploy my updated app onto the Hockey app. So I click it there, and I basically install it again. If I confirm, it will say it will already add it, so that's fine. But for you, it will actually say that it will add a new extension. Once you have done that, we're going back to our VSTS instance. I'm going to add the Hockey app build step, right? So again, the same thing. I go to add build step, I go to deploy, and there it is. In the deploy, you have an extension now for, because you added the extension for Hockey app, you have a build step to add it to your VSTS instance. So add it and close it. Okay. So for Hockey app, you also have to go to the same exercise. You want your VSTS instance to connect to your Hockey app account, right? So for that, you'll have to create another service point, and I'm going to show you how to create that. So in this particular case, it's again saying that, okay, I need a service point for my Hockey app. I'm going to go to manage, which will take me to the same service point, service connection point dialog. I create a new service endpoint, and because I've added the extension, it gives me the ability to add a Hockey app extension service point. So connection name again is Hockey app, and the API token is the API token that will generate from our Hockey app account. So I am going to go back to my Hockey app instance, go to my settings, and go to my API tokens. So we are actually connecting to Hockey app, and for connection to Hockey app, you would want to connect here an access point to Hockey app. We are again, I'll go back to our demo script so that we know where we are. We're right here. Yeah, so go to your account settings right here, and go to grab an API, so you can create an API and grab that.
So we added for the Hockey app connection.
So I'm going to grab that token exactly, and I'm going to go to my VSTS instance and put that token into the endpoint service connection. There you go. So in the new service endpoint for Hockey app, you add that particular token, you give that a name, and that's okay. So that will connect this instance of VSTS to your Hockey app.
Where did you just add that again? Not here.
So click manage.
There it is.
Yeah, and now create a new service for Hockey app and give it a name. So that's how you are connecting to your VSTS instance to your Hockey app as well. Now the last thing that we need to do is actually go back to our build definition, refresh so that it will use that particular connection, and you'll have that it shows up into the drop down. Remember, we had released the first version of the app to our testers, right? And there was an app ID there. So if you go back to your hockey app and dashboard, you will see our app there, and it will have an app ID. So grab that ID and actually paste it into our build definition. So because that's the ID that we want to, or that's the app that we want to actually deploy to. And the binary file path is the path to your APK file, right? So typically it's like platforms, Android, stuff, right? So here. And this is with respect to the root. So basically it's so what we have done here is we have added a connection point from VSTS to your hockey app, use our app ID so that it knows which app to upload and modify and update. And last but not the least, we have added the actual path to the package that we are going to build as a part of this VSTS instance. Okay? So far so good? Cool. And now I'm going to just save this particular instance, right? Okay. Cool. So now we have our build waiting to be triggered by a change that we will do, right? What I want to show, I want to do is, I want to be a dumb developer. And actually in my shape, I want to force crash the application. And I want the hockey app to kind of get that app crashing report shown to me on my hockey app instance. That's what I want to demo here. So what I'm going to do is, in my VS Code, I'm going to actually go to the controller which kind of responds to the shake event. And once I've got that, which is right here, right file. Yeah. So when I submit a survey, I'm actually going to do a hockey app force crash. And in my app.js, I'm actually going to register this particular app with the hockey app service. You might ask me, what is hockey app and where did that come from? We have released a version, a plugin for hockey app, which is Cordova plugin hockey app. And what that does is, that actually encapsulates the SDK for the hockey app, for the crash reporting, and the package management, so that the hockey app actually knows that this is a package that it needs to listen to, and has that integration point already set up. So if you search for Cordova plugin hockey app, you should find that particular plugin. And if I go into my config.xml, this particular project already has that particular plugin right here. So this is the new plugin that just got released about a week back, that actually encapsulates the SDK for the hockey app. Otherwise, you will always have to build an APK and release. Do the first step that we did is manual upload that particular instance of your APK onto the hockey app portal. Okay, so that's the plugin that we have already added. And now what we are going to do is we are going to register our app with the hockey app service, right? For that, let me actually go back to app.js. Okay, and just make sure that the app ID matches to the new app that we just submitted. So go back to the feedback app, grab this particular app ID, and make sure your app is now ready to post itself into the hockey app instance. So I'm going to go back to my VS Code instance, and in my start, which is the initialization function for hockey app, I'm going to make sure that I have the same ID as the app that I've just published. So what we did was, we registered our app with the hockey app. The first instance of the app that we registered was not enabled to actually hook up to our Hockey app service for crash reporting. Doing this initialization now enables that particular piece. And then we actually, being a bad developer, we actually just said that, okay, when I submit, when I shake my phone, I'm going to just crash my app and see if the Hockey app instance that is going to get this uploaded package through my cloud build actually reports that crash once it's installed on the tester's machine. Okay? So we force the crash, we registered the Hockey app with the Hockey app. We have now definitely written the build steps for the cloud build, and it's triggered by the continuous integration that we hooked up through our GitHub repo. And now we are actually going to submit this change and see if our cloud build actually kicks off. Okay? So those are the changes. And you can go ahead and save them and actually submit them. So I'm going to say crash. Yeah. One other thing I think we should do also is just to make sure that the new version of the app is uploaded. I'm going to go to config.xml and actually change the version of the app so that we know that, oh, we updated this particular version of the app. So I'm from 0.0.1, I'm actually going to update the version to 0.0.2 so that I know when it actually gets installed on a Hockey app, it's the new version, right? So let's do that. Crash the app, config.xml, things are fine. I'm going to use the UI right now. I'm going to sync this, right?
Just the three changes, right? App.js.
Yeah, app.js, controller.js, and your config.xml. I had a DTS file which was a VS Code extension for IntelliSense, but yeah.
Can we commit this?
Yeah, let's commit this. Let's commit it. Okay, let's see what happens. I committed it and I'm seeing that build actually being queued into my VSTS instance now.
Oh yeah.
So you go to your build and it's queued. So now what? If you double click that particular thing, it has a question. You'll see that it's actually trying to find an agent. We are hosting it. This is all cloud build. So it's trying to find an agent. What it will do actually is it will run a Cordova build. It will do the deploy, and you'll see that it actually deployed to your Hockey app instance.
So I have a question about the Hockey app SDK. Would it allow me to be able to take advantage of Hockey app features without having to host my app on Hockey app? Like, if I was to deploy my app in production.
Yeah, Hockey app allows you to have different stages, right? It can be a staging versus a production.
Yeah. And the Hockey app plugin, it literally just talks from the app to Hockey app.
Yes.
It doesn't actually have to go through
Right.
VSTS.
No. You can. VSTS is just a cloud build doing this automated stuff, right?
Yeah.
You can still have the plugin and you can just release it, and Hockey app will be able to do your stuff. Right?
So it's the CI aspect.
Yeah. So right now what it's doing is, for Ionic it is still using Ionic 1, for Cordova it's using 5.3.3. We've not yet moved that instance to use the latest of Cordova, but we can keep on using new versions of Cordova once they are stable and they support most of it.
You talked about Sauce earlier. Are you using Sauce in this toolchain here?
So basically right now we are just making sure that it's built and it's deployed, right?
Yeah.
The next thing is we'll add a gulp task or a sauce task to kind of run UI tests.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you go back to the actual the script, what I've done is like this is the deploy, first getting it to build and getting it to deploy, and there are other tasks that I've added later on that, okay, now I want to run unit tests. How do I do that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how, I wanted to make sure that we covered at least the release and the deployment piece of it.
Yeah.
And we can talk about how do you kind of integrate unit tests, how do you integrate source lab, and then all of this is available in the script. So you can follow the script to add those build steps. If you have a Source Lab account, you can definitely follow those steps to actually connect to the Source Lab and run your test from your VSTS instance into Source Lab. And there are curl tasks, like if you see here, I've also added some of the curl tasks here.
We did run the tests on SourceLab using APM.
Yes. The source, basically SourceLab comes with APM kind of instance installed. So for you as your protractor config, just say that okay, you're using a particular web address, which is an APM web address, and this is the actual emulator. So emulator or device or whatever you want. So while that is building, I can show you the actual config for running a SourceLab thing, right? So if you go into the app, you'll have protractor.config, and that's where the actual Selenium address is. So if you see the web address, it's talking to SourceLab, and it's getting that particular WebDriver address. It's saying that my capability is a Google Nexus 7 emulator, so it will actually run your test on the SourceLab, again on the cloud. So it's running from the cloud onto another cloud. It's running those tests and giving you back the results, and using SourceLab and APM on SourceLab. So if you see, like right now, I'm going back to my instance. Okay. It's done. Okay. So basically, there was a build warning. It's in red, but it's a warning. So hopefully the build is passing. And what if you go back to your feedback and you refresh this page, you'll actually see that there's a 0.002. The version that we just added is now onto your Hockey app portal. So if I'm a tester again, right? So if I test it again, I have the same Hockey app instance running on my device, and if I refresh it, I'll see that there are 2 versions available for this particular app. Oh,
Yeah, gotta work your test case out there.
right. Okay. So here. So it actually shows me 2 versions available, and I am going to install that particular version, right? So let me go ahead and install the latest version. Install. So it's actually installing this app now. I'm done with installing.
Mine's still going.
Oh, I'm faster.
You don't wait.
No, it's a hosted stuff though. We both were in queue. So you can install it from here, or you can install it from the app. I'm installing the app right now. Okay, app installed. I'm opening the app. I'm going to sign in again. Great to show this. Okay, so I've signed in with the app, and now I'm entering the app. I'm going to go through the feedback. Okay, do you like the CLI workflow? Not really. I like Cordova better. Running unit test on VSTS excites me, and I'll do that later. What about the next one? You want to deploy your app to be used by beta testers using for validation and testing. I know, I think I want to use Hockey app for that. How did you find this workshop? The attendance was not that great. Do you want to push the apps to your app? Do you want to push the apps updates to your app without going through the store? Oh yeah, I would love to do that. And then on the last page, shape submit, right? And there you go. You post a crash, and it's actually crashed. So this is the second version of the app that we simulated the crash, and it's actually crashed. So I'm going to say okay. I don't know what happened. What Hockey app does is you can initialize the Hockey app to say when it wants to send the crash reporting. Typically by default, it sends the crash reporting when you open the app again. So I'm going to open this app again. I'm on the start screen. So it crashed, I'm going to open it. And you can configure it. You can change it that, oh, send it immediately when the app crashes. So it's actually going to do this. I reopened the app after the crash. And now I'm going to refresh this page. And now what you saw was, okay, there are 2 downloads of this particular app because I downloaded it twice. And then there's a crash right there. And I can drill down here. And right now what this stuff does is that it actually doesn't show you JavaScript errors or the JavaScript call stack, it shows you native call stack. So whatever Hockey app.4 crash did, which was in native code, it will show you that it actually crashed at that particular location. So it gives you native app crash, it does not really provide you with JavaScript call stack. So for example, what we are working on is to get the actual JavaScript that called into the native land and get that onto the call stack as well, but we are not yet there. But this gives you the crash reporting, and I can send a feedback saying that, okay, I ran this app, something went wrong, here's the crash report. So Hockey app actually does definitely help you with that scenario. So now once I know that, oh, my app particularly crashed, I can go back, fix my app, and revalidate that the app crash has actually worked, right? So I fixed my app crash. So I'm going to go back and fix the app crash. So that was the basic part of how do you get your build and deploy working through VSTS hooked up to your Git repo. Now, if I want to add a test for it, right? You saw that I had some unit tests written, and they were actually launched using gulp task. So I want to go back to my VSTS instance, and I can start demoing a little bit here, rather than you kind of following it. But I can demo how you can actually connect from your VSTS instance, run a unit test, and then actually run a UI test that actually talks to a source line. So here, I'm going to actually go back to my VSTS instance. Because I want to run unit tests.
My response submitted.
Oh.
I don't know what I did.
You did not submit?
I mean, I shook it. It just didn't crash.
Maybe you didn't.
Maybe I don't know.
You didn't save?
Just too good.
Yeah, just too good.
Too good. Fix the problem.
We needed some response, so that's maybe on your machine we wanted to kind of not force crash, right? That's interesting.
Oh, you know why? Because I uncommented out the wrong thing. I uncommented out the.
No, see, you actually uncommented out the code to
My bad.
to fix it, right? No, but that's fine.
Yeah.
You have to. We'll see your response. So you commented the fix rather than the simulation of the break, which is great actually. Good. So going back to now we have around 10 minutes. So I want to just show how you can actually integrate unit testing and UI testing. We will not do the activity as such, but in the same instance, how can you get started? And I'm going to just do some stuff here that you can watch. But basically the idea here is add more build steps into VSTS instance so that you can build and run your unit test. So for that, I go back to my build. Since I'm using a lot of Jasmine and Karma and Protractor and I need them to be installed, I need to add an npm install task first so that my instance on the cloud has all the dev dependencies. Okay, and then I'll just run the gulp test task to show that it actually works. So what
You're still running all this in VS.
Yeah, all of this is still in cloud. It's not on the local.
But it's not on Sauce's cloud. It's still on your own cloud.
Yes,
right?
the gulp unit test is on my local cloud.
Okay. Yeah. So this is almost kind of like a Jenkins replacement.
Yep.
In a sense, right? Like
Yep.
a Jenkins.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, yeah, it's a CI.
Yeah.
I think it was full feature Jenkins, yeah.
I'm going to add an npm task, which is going to be an npm installer. I'm going to move it at the top. The next one I'm going to just do a gulp task. So and here, after the npm install is done, I'm just going to say test. Again, this is local unit testing. Hopefully this works. And here's the thing, like maybe I'll have to copy paste some stuff, but because created a Sauce Lab account, and here is where it's done. I need to kind of get my account and access it. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm actually connecting the same VSES instance to my Sauce Lab to run the test. Okay, so here I've actually logged onto my Sauce Lab account. I'm going back to my VSES instance, and now I'm going to actually add a couple of tasks. So deploy. We have done the npm install, we have done the gulp test, and now I'm going to actually upload the build package to Sauce Lab. So basically, again, the same thing. This is the file to be uploaded. I'm going to copy that and put it on my Sauce Lab. So here, curl task. So what I'm doing is I'm using curl utility to actually push the build APK onto the Sauce Lab. Username is okay. Password is actually the access key here. So what I'm going to do, instead of actually configuring it in variables, I'll just copy my access key from here. So I'll copy it here. So the URL, again, this is on the Sauce Lab documentation, but the URL is actually the post that the curl requires, right? So here, this is the URL, and you can use this account because it's a test account that we have created. So if you want to run your test, you can definitely use this account for now, for some time. So here, I'm actually going to Sauce Lab. I'm going to paste the URL. This is actually a post through the curl. And finally, I'm going to give some options to it so that it goes into the right side of things, right? And most of this information, again, is available on the Sauce Lab itself. And in the resources page, there is a link to this particular documentation. But this is Sauce Lab specific. This is not VSTS specific. It's basically anytime you want to have a CI system talk with Sauce Lab using curl to upload files, you will have to do that. Right? So that's basically curling it and putting that stuff, putting our build APK onto the Sauce Lab. Now what we want to run is, once we have connected and put the APK on the Sauce Lab, we want to run our test using protractor and talk to the Sauce Lab extension or the server that is running on the Sauce Lab. That will actually trigger the actual test running on the emulator in the cloud. So for that, we'll actually add a command line utility. Let's add a command line utility.
Does Crow run on Windows?
This is currently running on Windows. VSTS instance is running on Windows.
Crow runs on Windows?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a C program, so you could just compile it.
I'm guessing you could just eventually have like a integration for Sauce Labs, just like.
Good point. Yep.
Right.
Today we don't, but yeah, there can be a test method or a test build step to just say that all of this is actually included, and you need to just provide your username and access key.
Is it just Microsoft that creates these integrations, or is it like community?
Anyone can create.
Anyone can create this. Anyone can create this.
And like so
So we're seeding it with ones that we think contribute to the overall Cordova community.
Yeah.
And think of them as basic building blocks. But ultimately, as you indicated before, this is just any continuous integration system, just like Jenkins.
Yeah.
And so Of course, every business and every organization is every development team is going to have their own special tasks that they have to create. These are just some basic building blocks for you to start with. Cool.
So what I've done is basically based on the patch that these the BSTS instance built by APK, I've said that okay, once you have built your APK, and actually this requires an APK, so this will be here. So what the build steps are basically get the npm dependency, run unit test, then build the package, then use code to deploy the package to source lab, run your UI test on the source lab using protractor and APM running on the source lab. And if everything succeeds, now go ahead and deploy the app to Hockey app for beta testing. I can go ahead and kick off this run, and I'm going to do that, let it run. But the other part that I wanted to lead from here is that
in your command line, you got to change the API key for Sauce Labs ID for the arguments.
I've not created a video. Deploy. And I'll copy the access key again.
Is that gulp module just for like the global gulp?
Yep.
Essentially?
Yeah.
Yep.
Basically just saying this build will use gulp scripts later on, and then anything consequent to that can use gulp scripts.
Yeah.
So just to not commit a change again, or maybe I'll fix the code and do it again, I'm just going to queue this build so that I'll just run this new build, right? I mean, that will actually go ahead and queue the same build. And if you do the npm install and all that, you see that happening. Now, given that tester actually tested it, what if the crash that you simulated was in consumer systems? If it was actually a product defect, right? That is running on people's mobile devices, right? If you fix it, the correct way of doing it is actually you provide an update. And that update goes through the store and comes as an update or an updated version for the end user to download. What we also have is a code push extension that allows you to run all of this, but hook up code push service so that you can actually install your app out of band using BSTS and code push extension. So all of what we did can result into either a deployment to Hockey app for testers, or the last step could be, okay, deployment to actual consumers or users using code push so that they don't have to go through store, but they get an app update right in their hands. And there's this extension that I want to lead you up with, is that if you go to Marketplace and browse for Marketplace, you actually have the code push extension right here. Interesting. Right here, okay. This is the extension. So once you install this extension, you can actually use code push to push your code out of band, and you don't need a store kind of thing. And actually Ryan is going to talk about code push tomorrow in his small demo and presentation that he's going to do. So basically, if you have a fix, you can use this code push on your CLI locally to push it, and so that the users get it in hand. Or you can use this extension and integrate it with VSTS so that your continuous integration is always pushing code to users whenever you make a fix. So that's a couple of ways that you can do it, either if you're using local CLI or using VSTS integration points. Let's see what, so npm install is being run, and hopefully it succeeds and we can get the actual deployment, or we can actually see that it's running and it will run UI test on my source level.